I'm the Director of Engineering at Enerlife Consulting. So at Enerlife Consulting, we use these sort of evidence-based, data-driven ways to find the operational savings in the building. So, I mean, other than that, we have other streams within that organization, but I'm just going to focus on today's presentation, which is we're going to be driving this agenda through. So I also have from the Montreal University, Jim Dick. You met him earlier. I'm not sure, Jim, if Dylan's on the line, but Dylan, he's the manager, facility manager. So I'm hoping to have a good conversation with them, and there's going to be obviously questions which between Jim, myself, and Dylan will be able to address all of those questions that you have for around this presentation. So
just for an FYI, Dylan is not available, so it's just myself.
Okay, thanks, Jim. I had a previous conversation with Deol. I will try to fill his shoes, but definitely I won't be able to completely justify it, but I'll try my best to have the conversation on his behalf on some of the initiatives they have planned or they've been currently doing. And we also have a Jim to address some of these items as we go. So, in terms of the agenda, so we had the introductions with everyone who's on the line. We'll be covering energy efficiency plans. So this is what sort of MRU initiated the plan back in 2017, and which did involve a lot of data processing and which you will get a glimpse of it in today's presentation. And we'll also have Jim comment on some of the other initiatives that has happened since then around CHP and solar PV. All right, let's start with, so one of the things with all of these portfolios that we review within either it's an institutional building or a commercial portfolio for a landlord, one of the things that a common theme for all of these buildings is the benchmark exercising. So there's two things that benchmarking exercise does. Is one is it gives you sort of an high level view of your buildings, where they sit and what is sort of the high level saving potential in those buildings. And then you get an idea so you could do benchmark analysis either against your own portfolio of the building. I highly recommend that's something strategy has worked for MRU. And then you can also benchmark your buildings against your peers as well. So that gives you an idea where the saving potential and what are the top buildings or top high saving potential buildings that you need to focus on. So as a saving potential opportunity. So benchmarking exercise gives you that opportunity to look at the high level view. So for MRU, when we looked at it, we definitely did the initial high level benchmarking exercise. So that in that way we were able to pick for this sort of analysis. We had 5 buildings that we reviewed, main building being their biggest one, and then building EA, EB, EC, and ED. Those are the total 5 buildings within their campus that had this highest saving potential that came out of the initial benchmark exercise. So what you're seeing on this graph is the total electricity and total gas saving potential. So among all of these buildings, again, thanks to Jim and his team, this exercise was only possible because MRU was so organized with their data. So because of the data was available even at the utility level, and it was all streamlined, there wasn't any issues with doing the initial benchmarking. So again, kudos to their team for having this sort of regularly maintaining that data and processing that data and looking at data on a regular basis is a very good starting point for any building to look at. So the initial saving potential for total electricity was around $1 million, 950,000 square feet of $950,000, and their total gas saving potential was around 334. Which overall for all this building, it comes around $1.265 million in utility cost savings. And in the rest of the presentation, we're going to look at how much of that has been saved and what are the sort of good accomplishments they've made, and then what are the things they're currently challenges they're faced within this process or path to achieve these saving potentials. So again, so this saving potential is based on benchmarking and setting up some realistic, rational targets against those buildings, which are again based on the top quartile buildings within the type of the building type. So you can easily rationalize what is your saving potential based on what other peers or what other high performing buildings are doing that usually doesn't have any greater significance to the how old is the building or how near the building. It's just operational savings are driven by how good you're operating their building and what you can drive out of those operational savings. So we will come to these in sort of a benchmark components. This is sort of the next step in breaking down the data. So for your electricity utility consumption, you kind of take the electricity and you broke it down further into three components, which is your base electricity, electric cooling, electric heating. I will go through this for one building as an example, so you can kind of get a gist of it, what this entails. So basically what it is when you've done a simple regression analysis on electricity, you could break down your electricity into three components: base electric cooling, electric heating. Your base electricity is any electricity used in the building that's not weather dependent. For example, ventilations, fan, lighting, that's not weather dependent. So electric cooling is something that's weather dependent, like how much electricity you would need for the summer operation of the building. And similarly, electric heating is how much heating you would need, or electric heating you would need in winter operation for the building. So one thing to point out here is for majority of the buildings, the highest saving potential or most saving potential is in the base electricity. So when you look at the number, it's around $903,000. So that kind of tells you, data is telling you that the focus should be on the base electricity, optimizing the base electric systems, not on electric cooling, because there aren't been, or the priority, there aren't been any majority savings in the electric cooling system. So similarly on gas, you could break down the gas into base thermal and heating thermal by simple regression analysis, and that tells you where to focus on. So in this case for MRU, the majority of the savings in the operations is in the base thermal, which is around $306,000 rather than a heating thermal. So again, directionally, data tells you where to focus, and then you can sort of further dig down. This is what the story we're going to be discussing today around one of the buildings for the main building, how we use that data to further break it down into subcomponents and then focus on those subcomponents to get the saving potential. So this is the MRU story. I'm just going to take a few minutes to explain this slide. What you see here is three distinct lines. Here's your red. So actually, before I do that, so on the bottom, on the x-axis, it's your monthly consumption. It starts from January 2016. It goes all the way to December 2020. So that's your monthly consumption for this main building. And then you have on the y-axis is your electricity consumption, and then the timeline is on the x-axis. Your red line is your weather normalized 2015 baseline. So this is sort of the comparison against the 2015 baseline, and it's normalized every year based on that year weather. So if it's colder outside or warmer outside, your baseline will go up and down accordingly, and it's normalized for that.
Sorry to interrupt, and I hope that's okay. There's a question on the side, and it was, are they annual numbers? And I assume that they were. And what is the base thermal envelope? I don't know if those are easily answered but.
Yeah, no. So yeah, those are annual numbers, and this is the annual saving potential. And the base thermal is your reheat, your domestic hot water use, or any retail use. For example, if you have any restaurants in there that's used the kitchen, that's your base thermal. Any heating thermal is any additional heat you would use to heat up the building during the colder weather.
Yeah, the thermal runs all year. The base thermal runs all year pretty much, and the heating is during the heating season.
Yeah, I'm going to go into the details of those again, and when we cover them are the main building story. So that's just a snapshot of what the saving potential in each of those opportunities. So going back to this, so the weather normalized 2000 baseline is your red. Then your blue line is, or blue dots is your actual consumption without CHP and solar. So anytime you see a blue dot below the red dot, that means those are the savings associated with energy efficiency projects that MRU did. And the third line is your actual consumption with CHP and solar. So when they brought on the CHP and the solar PV, you could see the consumption on the building level drop because CHP and the solar start compensating for that decrease in the consumption. So if you were to look at the energy savings opportunities or just energy savings achieved since I think it started around March of 2017, the difference between the red and the blue is the energy efficiency savings that MRU achieved over the years. Just for information, so we put a COVID started in February 20. So some of these drops on energy efficiency line it's contributed because of the COVID changes as well and less operations in the building. But anything prior to that is the actual savings achieved by the building with the operational measures they did within the building. And then the difference you see here between the red and the orange line is your combined savings from CHP, energy efficiency, and solar. I just put a one graph, but you can put a 1 point here, but you can see over starting since September 2018, this is what the overall sort of savings achieved because of those three measures. Just to kind of give you a comparison of the last 12 months of data prior to February 2020, these are sort of the numbers that you see contrast. Solar PV, again, it's smaller piece, but still significant. And then you have CHP contribution as well as the energy efficiency contribution to these profiles. So this, I mean, again, there is this is sort of a good story on how MRU sort of accomplished. I don't know if Jim, do you wanna, on a high level, I know we can go on certain detail, maybe kind of highlight some of the key projects you guys initiated around. I know there was some LED lighting works done, and there was also some funding projects done through pump replacements and retro recommissioning projects, which we're going to come in a second. But if you can just kind of give a high level of what are the sort of the projects that initiated that led to these sort of savings.
Yeah, the SIF funding allowed us to change over some fans to VFDs. We did some lighting retrofits, and the solar PV project was part of that SIF funding. And that's about it. We still have a long ways to go with our lighting retrofits. We have a long ways to go with our main campus building, which is a legacy 1970 building that's still operated with pneumatic controls. So if we could convert that to digital, it would make a huge dent in our energy consumption and allow us to do more lighting control, demand control ventilation, which is huge, and yeah, we still have a long way to go.
Definitely, Jim. I think this is a great start in terms of what savings are being achieved, and I think, yeah, as you mentioned, there's still a lot of work needs to be done, and I think this is going to be a continuous story to follow. Just on the gas side again, your red is your weather normalized 2015 baseline. Your blue is the actual consumption without the CHP, and your orange is the actual consumption with the CHP. So as you guys know, as we add the CHP into the equation, there's going to be obviously a natural gas increase in the building. And this is when the CHP actually started. And the sort of latest trend on, if you look at the difference between the blue and the red or above the baseline, is some of the COVID response that I'm pretty sure most of you guys are also trying to figure out what's an optimized way to run these buildings with increase additional outside air. So this is additional on sort of the increase in the consumption is because of that additional outside air needed on the COVID response. So in terms of the gas, obviously there are certain challenges that MRU is still working around to materialize those savings. But again, as an organization, there's always been an ups and down in each of these stories, and I think this is sort of a great learning experience for everyone. Is that at least for even for us or MRU was that these things takes time and they're not easy, and especially around operations, it takes more time to materialize these savings, and even around especially the legacy buildings which have old pneumatics and old reed control valves. So it will be great to hear from other folks out there, like what other things they have been doing around sort of achieving those savings. But we'll have that opportunity in a second. So that was the main sort of overall, like how we're progressing. I'm just going to kind of drill deep into sort of these energy components and how those savings or that those savings were derived using a data, and how was data sort of guiding the focus of these analysis. So we will focus, because of the time limits, we'll focus only on one building, and I'm just gonna start with this is the main building basically. So previously we looked at the energy components for this overall for the at the buildings level, but this is the energy components when you take the electricity and break it down into smaller components like base electricity, electric cooling, and electric heating. You kind of look at, and then you put a rational targets around those to drive the savings potential. So for MRU, for the MRU main building, once again, the majority of the savings were projected in the base electricity, and which again entails to reviewing the fan power, lighting, plug load, and heat pumps if there's any. So this is just sort of a general comments. But electric cooling, again, there wasn't much saving potential. So their electric cooling or their chillers are sort of in a fully optimized position right now. So the focus was to just look at the base electricity. That's where the majority of the savings were, not in electric cooling and heating. Again, data is sort of driving that bus in terms of where to look at for those changes. And again, just one quick note here, when you look at the 2015 versus 2016 comparison, you could see that the simple EUI on between 16 and 15 and comparison between 15 and 16, there's a drop in the base electricity and electric cooling for this main campus. Similarly for gas, you could break down into base thermal and heating thermal. Again, your base thermal is your reheat domestic hot water and any sort of retail you have, which is a load that's year round and it's not weather dependent. And then the heating thermal is your load, which is seasonal operation of space and ventilation heating. So majority of the savings here, again, in the case of the base thermal in the case of the total gas consumption is in the base thermal. When you look at compared to 259,000 for overall, 238,000 was in the base thermal. So again, drives the theme that the focus was on sort of getting those savings through the base thermal opportunities and optimizing those systems first, then looking at the heating thermal software. So overall, again, for the main building, the total saving potential is around $1 million in combined electricity and gas. So what do you do when you know that the base thermal or base electricity is your culprit? How do you do, what's the next step? So again, this is sort of a bottom-up analysis of the breakdown of the base electricity. So base electricity in this case for this particular building consists of lighting equipment, air handling units, exhaust fan pumps, and retail. But when you put a ration, so when you calculate this metrics watts per square feet, for each of these components, and then put a rational target around new watts per square foot around it based on the comparison that you see in high performance building, you could initially, like, you can basically right away know that where is the saving potential. And in this case, for this building, the two main areas where the saving potential were for lighting and the handling units. So rather than focusing on all of these at a given time, the data is telling us to focus on lighting and handling units, and that's what MRU's been trying to do, is to focus on those two. And if there is any additional equipment that would contribute to the savings, but this is sort of the path that leads you to the next step. And then so from there you go to lighting and see, okay, let's look at the lighting, what's going on with the lighting. So when we sort of did the analysis with MRU, we looked at, again, all of this is driving through the metrics, right? So you look at the lighting watts per square feet. So you do a lighting audit and find out, okay, what's your watts per square feet for each of these areas? Does that make sense in terms of, is this the current lighting standard for the watts per square feet for that area? And if not, what you could get out of this? And then maybe even also focus on the areas where you see there are higher watts per square foot lighting numbers, and then focus on getting those areas done first, and then moving on to the other areas. Again, there's another factor around the number of hours the lights are working, so that also becomes a part of it. But this is, again, another metrics you can use to drive where to focus on to get those savings if you have a limited resources and limited budgets. This is another way that MRU is trying to accomplish those things. Again, I mean, in 2017, those options were limited, but now with LED growing, the options are more. So you could either look at relamping, delamping, LED retrofits, or even upgrading the controls in those buildings. And I think the initial part of the exercise was to look at the lighting schedules and see, can you initially just make those lighting schedule matches with the building occupancy? That's going to give you a savings. The paybacks is basically in less than a few months for those initiatives. Then it's sort of like, once you look at the lighting, the next base electricity components is your fan power densities. So again, you drive those discussions around where to focus and what is the data telling you through developing these simple matrices around watts per CFM or CFM per square foot for your facility. So in this case of the main building, when this exercise was done, it kind of points out to there's a higher watts per CFM that's for all of these fans. And that generally tells you where to focus on for if the fans watts per CFM are higher, or even when you look at the actual CFM per square foot on those their supply fans or the return fan, you will get a good indicator where to focus. And you can do this on a complete building level, or you could do this on a system level, which is what we prefer, is to do it on system level. Then you can pinpoint which systems are giving you trouble in terms of the higher CFM per square foot or higher watts per CFM, and then sort of prioritize those systems as a first opportunity to optimize, and then kind of work with the rest of the systems. But it gives you a direction where to follow, where to sort of use the data to follow that direction, even within the fan system, and driving those fan power density. One of the key observations just going to make here, when we looked at the total exhaust CFM or exhaust watts per CFM, it stands out very high. So we're still sort of investigating what is the opportunity there. But again, comparing the exhaust CFM 0.64 watts per CFM to supply CFM 0.69, this is the number, the ratio tells you that it's pretty high, and it shouldn't be that high in that case. So fan power, again, majority of that you can control, or you can see where it's being wasted. It's around higher static pressure set points in your building. So just doing a simple table around the fans and then documenting what their actual static pressures is, and you can see here in this case there's a difference between different fans feeding the same building, but the static pressure set points are all different. And majority of the times that from other examples that we noticed is those static pressure set points are not sort of field driven. They're basically set based on original consultant spec that usually should be an indicator, but that's not the actual static pressure that your system needs. So having this sort of documentation of your systems helped MRU to drive those where to look for, which are the systems they should focus on, and sort of optimize those systems around static pressure resets and having those field measurements done on those systems to optimize those systems. This is really interesting one, at least for us and even for MRU, and we're still nowhere near to a close to a solution around fan scheduling. And I know I talked to Dylan about it, and he mentioned that he definitely want to hear from other folks what are their current practices around fan scheduling. And one of the challenges that everybody's kind of facing is that how do you make sure that you have a coordination between the administrator and the actual fan schedule on the fan? What is the best way to do that? But in this slide, what I'm just trying to show here is, again, the importance of having that data so readily available to you. So what you see is basically a fan, a VFD speed on and off, and on each of these three graphs. And sort of a simple comparison on this one is when you look at the first green circle on your left, it's when the fans were off, and the sort of the next circle is the fans were on. So it's sort of clear that, I mean, there's been a sort of a scheduling issue that needs to be figured out. What is the best way to schedule these fans? Because that's going to drive a lot of savings. If you can pinpoint one of these simple things is aligning those fan schedules with the classroom schedules in some sort of an automated format, that can give you tons of savings within your system. The next one was, this is the fan power control optimization. Again, the power here is on each of these graphics that are currently available within your facility, is just having a dedicated resource to look at these graphics on a regular basis. So for example, this graphics, three things were happening on this graphics is that you could see at minus 11 degree outside air, which is supposed to be the minimum outside air, that damper was open around 60% or around 70%, which shouldn't be the case. So, and I know when speaking to Dylan, he drived a lot of these graphical views of the system to drive a lot of these operational savings or retrocommissioning processes that within their facilities that they looked at. So even not even going into the trend log analysis, just looking at these control graphics gives you an indicator how your system is performing. Obviously, you would need additional data on the trend log analysis and other key parameters to kind of confirm those things. But having a good review of the system on a regular basis will definitely help you with initially what is an issue with the system and what could be corrected, and then further followed up with the trend log analysis. The ventilation action plan, again, this is what came out of the initial work and the meetings is to focus on these two elements: ventilation scheduling and retrofits, and also ventilation system scheduling. So these are the key elements, and again, driven by air handling testing data that tells you where to locate those issues in retrofits, and sort of simple reprogramming of sequence of operation, looking at the trend logs, and then identifying those retrofit projects using those air testing results to optimize your system. And same with the ventilation scheduling, implementing a campus-wide scheduling was something that was prioritized for MRU. So that's me. So we're still in sort of base electricity and all the actions they did to improve those savings. A pump was another big one where I think through, I believe it was through a SIF funding that they were able to install VFDs on, I think it was around 60 pumps, and reprogram them, those sequence of operations, to actually work on the heating demand and not outside air, and also control those VFDs using the differential pressure set points. This is sort of another opportunity is that looking at the actual number of operating hours for each of your pumps, and then comparing it against, is this the right sort of targeted number of operations, or is there opportunity to reduce those operating hours, and what are the key things you needed to do those? So that was mainly electricity, and just on the thermal side, again, as we pointed out earlier, that even for this building, the majority of the savings were in the base thermal. So when you look at the 2016 data, put a rational target around it, compared to other buildings, you're looking at a saving potential of $238,000 in base thermal, and which in this case was primary reheat in the building. So again, data is sort of telling you there's less work to be done on a heating thermal, but majority of the savings could be materialized if we focus it on optimizing the reheat in the building. So that's sort of gives you an indicator when you look at the supply fans air volumes and return fan air volumes, to sort of give you a simple math will tell you how much of that, based on the supplier temperature, how much of the energy are you supplying in terms of reheat, and you can always do this at the BTU meter level if you have those BTU meters to calculate how much of the reheat are you doing in the summer in the system, and how could you optimize those reheat systems in the building. Heating thermal, again, if you for MRU wasn't a big concern. It's still definitely with the COVID, the recent changes, still there's an opportunity to optimize these systems. But within your systems, if this is a good indicator to sort of measure what's your outside air on each of those systems, and that will tell you that there is a tons of opportunity around heating thermal on those systems if you optimize these outside air volumes that are being used. And you could see here on this table, there's, I mean, one system is 18, other system is 30, 35. So there's no, and some of them are even 40% outside air on those systems. And the sort of the recommissioning process should involve looking at these numbers, whether you're calculating or measuring these numbers, then sort of looking at each of those systems and figuring out how to optimize these outside air volumes in each of those systems so they are actually meeting the code requirements and not over ventilating the space. Because anytime you have a higher heating thermal load in the building, it generally is around bringing more outside into the building. Again, the importance of the trend logs cannot be stressed here. So having a good access to trend logs and having some sort of platform, either you can use Excel or some sort of a platform to look at those trend logs on a regular basis, will help you optimize this systems. And so in this example, the blue on the top graph is your heating well position, and the red is the VFD speed. And you can see on a milder weather, the heating well was 100% open. When compared to a colder weather, the heating wells was only running at 50%. So this tells you there's an optimizing opportunity to optimize your heating controls with other trend log analysis as well. So having a sort of those trend logs available to you on a regular basis and easily accessible is the key, and having some person and sort of getting those training done on those person how to analyze those trend logs is another opportunity to optimize these control system. So again, building thermal action plan that came out of the planning, original planning, was that having to perform this air testings within these facilities, and also optimizing the ventilation schedules, reprogramming and verifying the sequence of operations. So again, all of these are operational changes that doesn't need a lot of capital, and these are all could be done within the operational budgets of the facility. But the focus is like how do you drive to those changes? Again, everything in this case was driven through the data that it's not you need a tons of data. It's whatever you have already available through your building automation system, through your utility bills. That's what we use to drive these measures. So sub-metering is good to have, but again, this is something you wouldn't necessarily need to drive these changes. So having a good access to the trend logs and having those interval meter data or even utility data will give you a lot of good insights within these buildings to drive those changes. Finally, just a reflection on the energy action plan and strategy was sort of having these key elements within your program to review those elements on a regular basis. That how do you coordinate with, for example, that the other projects are currently happening in the facility? Is that which projects are you prioritizing in energy efficiency projects? So these are the sort of the elements that MRU currently tracking and keeping in mind when they're looking at initiating a project or looking at achieving those savings that they currently achieve, and also further achieving those savings, and what are the things that's going to hinder that process, whether it's resources, internal resources, what are the goals and timelines around that plan, and having a periodic updates on these plans to sort of give them an opportunity to reflect on what are the things that have been done, what are the things they currently need to do to maximize those saving potential. I think I'm just going to bring you, Jim, here for a second. If you can sort of maybe give some commentary around. I know Dylan mentioned a few things about the retro commissioning process that you guys went through recently, and he noticed that with the new BAS. You've been able to use a lot of those insights to drive some of the improvements within the facility and continue to do that.
Sorry, I'm not really able to comment on that as much as Dylan could, because that's more on the operational side of things. I'm more on the data collection and energy usage end of things, so I can't really comment on that too much.
No problem, Jim. I know. I think I spoke to Dylan about it, and this is sort of what he was very excited about, is to use the building automation system to its full capacity and drive those changes within the building. Don, I'm done with my part. I think there's a couple of other slides that Jim's going to talk about the combined heat and power and solar. So are we going to wait for the questions, or should I let Jim speak about the two initiatives and we take the questions afterwards?
Yeah, I think letting Jim talk to a couple slides would be a good step. I think that's what we should probably do. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So there are two other initiatives that MRU sort of initiated, and we've seen the results on the combined CHP and solar PV. I'm just going to let Jim speak on behalf of MRU around what was the project around, and if there's any good stories to share with the team.
Yeah, okay. This unit is an 850 kilowatt unit that we commissioned in September of 2018. I track interval data on this one, as well as the solar PV installations, so that we can coordinate with the building time of use meters, so we can actually get total building performance. This unit has performed extremely well. We've had 94% runtime on this unit, which is quite incredible. We have saved about we've taken about 510 automobiles off the road annually with this unit, when you consider the heat rejected to the building. So it's a very good success story. One huge advantage is that we've lowered our billing demand by 785 kilowatts, as long as you're careful not to do any maintenance during high periods of consumption, like cooling days. Otherwise, you're right back where you were with your demand. So that's pretty well what we've done with that CHP unit. You could just bring on the solar one. This is a 144 kilowatt installation on one of our roofs. This was part of the SIF funding that we managed to procure. Unfortunately, because our orientation is not quite south, it's about southeast. We're not getting the performance potential that we could. And combined with the fact that because we're installing on an existing roof, those solar panels have to be installed at only 10 degrees. Ideally, you should install them at your solar latitude, which in Calgary is 51 degrees. So you're going to have about a 68% solar PV potential than you could, and so unfortunately you're not going to get the potential you require. And if you're prioritizing energy efficiency projects, that the last UFC presentation hit the nail on the head as far as making sure that you analyze your GHG saved per dollar spent. And I believe energy efficiency projects far outweigh alternative energy projects in that realm of things. That's about it.
All right. Thanks, Jim. So I'm just going to open the floor for questions and comments or any sort of insights.
Yeah, that's excellent. I think one of the questions that came up on the chat is the payback period on the CHP unit. Michael from the University of Alberta mentioned that in their case, over 15 years due to service, maintenance, and rebuild costs throughout the life cycle. It may be less with larger units. Do you have an idea, Jim, in the case of your unit? I know UC also has large units. What is there kind of an idea that you have of the payback period for the unit? Maybe not. Yeah, it looks like that. That Michael's comment is that one. But if anyone else has experience, any other questions about the data? And thanks very much for the presentation on such short notice. Really appreciate putting that together, and for your comments, Jim. It's great to be able to hear some of the specific issues, particularly around those solar panels. Things to keep in mind if other folks are considering it. And to all the success Mount Royal's had. I mean, you guys have went ahead with a bunch of changes, and you found some good savings and some opportunities that still exist. So hopefully we'll get chances with future government funding to really take advantage of those. Are there any other questions or comments anybody wanted to make? Thanks, Anish. So another question for Jim, and I'll work with Jim if we're not able to answer some of these questions right now, and Dylan and Grant from Mount Royal to follow up on these. We may not have the answers right away, but the question from Anish at MacEwan University in Edmonton is, what was the overall cost of the CHP project, and what were the issues that you faced while installing? Jim, do you have any feedback in that regard?
I was not involved in the actual construction portion of that project, so I really can't comment on that one.
Yeah. So I'll try to find out for him. We may. Dylan wasn't around then either, but I'll try to talk to Grant and maybe just get some, like you say, the major issues. It'd be valuable to have an understanding of that. I think the answer, Julian, to your question, Julian from University of Calgary asked, would Mount Royal have pursued the photovoltaic project if without that SIF funding? And my expectation is that it was the only reason was because that money was available for that. So yeah, it wouldn't have been pursued without SIF funding.
Yeah, I would concur with that analysis. The payback is not great. I'd say for this installation, seeing that we have the orientation and the angle that this unit is installed at, the installed efficiency is about 10%. So that isn't great. I would say if you're analyzing energy efficiency projects, other projects would be much higher on the priority list if that metric was about GHG saved per dollar spent was looked at much closer.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's an excellent point. There's lots of different stakeholders you're trying to engage when you put together projects like this. And in hindsight, but I think what the approach is to prioritize based on data and collecting that data up front and getting as good information as you can. So it's definitely an issue. Aaron from RDC, Red Deer College, said they're considering adding a second 1 megawatt, so similar size CHP, and the simple payback for the option in their calculations was 3.8 years. So there's a lot of calculations. I'm sure it'd be interesting to kind of compare what UVA found with their 15 years, the 3.8 years, and we'll look at what Mount Royal, if we can get some information about Mount Royal's payback.
Yeah, I'd actually agree with that. If you're talking strictly about energy savings, yeah, it's about 3.5 years is probably where you're at.
Yeah, totally. Thanks. Jason mentions, Schuler also mentions that from concerns about the calculations on paper can be different than what happens in reality. I think that's very true. In particular, I think it's true when there's kind of unproven aspects, putting the solar panels on and then, realizing at some point in the life of that project, well, we need this angle, but if we put them at this angle, there's going to be way too much wind load on them, and there'd be some risk to the roof. And the more you can anticipate those things and know those things, and the more that you have experience with those in different climates and places and different roofs, you're going to be able to anticipate more and more of those issues. Anish had an excellent question where the CHP was manufactured. I think it's an ATCO unit, but I don't know who manufactures it. Do you know, Jim?
Actually, that is a Jenbacher engine, and the whole project was initiated through ATCO because they were able to access about 30% funding for this project.
Yeah, when you can get 30% funding, you can imagine that that helps the financial aspect of it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Any other questions? Jason, you want to?
Yeah, no, I thought that was really good stuff. Like that's some neat things there. So just a question, like we use our control system as the Siemens system. I'm curious which system MRU used for controls.
They have Siemens as well.
Siemens as well. Okay.
We actually have some Honeywell as well. So we've got a mix of the two.
Okay, right on, thanks.
How does that affect things? I mean, when you have different systems going together, I assume that they're supposed to be kind of interoperable, but it must not always work perfectly, or is there a reason that there's a mix, or would you want to go to one? Do you have an idea, Jim?
It's more of a competition thing where if you're stuck with one supplier, you're not assured of the best possible price. So every project that we have on a new building, we go out for tender to both of them.
Excellent. That makes sense. Great. Thanks. Michael made the point again from U of A that they lost 50 kilowatts of photovoltaics in the last wind event. You know, and it is a real issue throughout Alberta, but there's windier parts, certainly down south. But yeah, I mean, Calgary can be very windy, and I was in West Edmonton Mall when we had that huge wind event probably 30 years ago. Thought the water park roof, you could just see the pounding wind and water with all that glass. It was a little scary, but it held up. But yeah, certainly wind has a big impact on photovoltaics. It's something that has to be considered if you want to put it at the right angle. Any other questions or comments? Please go ahead. Yeah, Jason.
Yeah, sorry. So just another question. Like, so with our Siemens system, we're trying to utilize the system to calculate energy consumption. So like a VFD, the load that it's driving. And is that similar to what the Siemens system did in MRU versus putting in like a hard meter to measure consumption on a circuit? Like, is that functionality there? And I'm trying to work with our Siemens team here in Edmonton, and it's been a challenge to kind of make some forward progress on that. So I'm just wondering if that functionality was there and that's how you did it in Calgary.
Yeah, I can sort of address that. I think it's the primary for this exercise. It wasn't. So you're looking at these systems at a two level. I think one is, as you're mentioning, what you're trying to do is set up a virtual meters for your VFDs, which is usually a good indicator. And if you don't need any sort of revenue grade information, I think that's a good indicator. Using a backnet point from the VFD to set up a virtual meter on individual VFDs to give you sort of the kilowatt consumptions and kilowatt hour consumptions on those meters. So that's certainly doable, but I don't think so for this. So for this exercise, it wasn't needed because all we were looking at is looking at the data at high level and helping us drive that discussion around what's the number. So when you look at it was sort of an instantaneous snapshot of the building rather than a continuous review of the building on a longer period. So when you look at just the instantaneous snapshot, all you need is a VFD and an average VFD speed. You need to know what your VFD is doing for that period. And you look at that average kilowatts on that period to come up with so the majority of the time those VFDs are running in that range, like maybe 70 to 80% of your VFD speed. So for this sort of analysis, you don't need a virtual meter. You can even set up the virtual meter outside if you want it, not even on the system, as long as you have a kilowatt feedback from the VFD. And then you can have, Excel sheet or even other platforms to create those virtual meters based on that data.
Excellent. Does that answer your question, Jason? Or?
Yeah, no, that's really good. And I guess the other question I had was, I think about midway through your presentation, Amandeep, you kind of had broken out, I guess, your target areas for your base electricity. You had lighting and then I think your fans. So how did you know? How did you come up with, I guess, the breakout of where your electricity was going?
Yeah, so again, when you look at this sort of comparison, this is looking at watts rather than, you definitely put the hours to get you the kilowatt hours as well. But the breakdown was mainly on an instantaneous sort of building snapshot. So the data that you drive, for example, on the fans, you would know it from the VFD. So you can do a readout from the VFD itself on the kilowatts. For the pumps, you will do the same thing as a VFD readout from the pumps kilowatts. And then any other loads that's not part of that, you can do a spot measurements, like LED, for example, lighting. You can measure at the panel itself or during the day, what's the average kilowatt that you're using for that instantaneous. And same thing you can do this is not, I mean, obviously this is not a perfect, but this is the good, I think, way to drive those numbers. And then you can know from those numbers, when you put a rational target around it, to see where to focus on those numbers. So again, it's, I mean, other ways you have to do is put a lot of sub-meters, which again, as I mean, a lot of people pointed out that those sub-meters doesn't give you the value that it's supposed to. So first of all, you have to maintain that data. And secondly, to use that data, it's not giving you, so lighting, for example, it remains sort of on an average, it remains consistent when it's on or it's off, right? So as long as you have a schedules on the lighting that tells you when it's on and off and the average kilowatts, that's all you want to do to drive that energy efficiency. If you see those kilowatts are higher, then you look at the project around, okay, shall we replace those LED lighting to bring those watts down, and then sort of optimize the schedules on the lighting system.
No, great, thanks.
Excellent, thanks. We're getting to that time. It's around noon. We have time for another question. If you do come up with anything afterwards, please just forward it. I'm going to publish the recording of the presentation, and I think we'll be sending out the PowerPoint. I might check and make sure it's okay with Mount Royal. Yeah, thanks everyone for attending. Thanks for making the time for this. Certainly look forward to meeting again. Our next meeting is scheduled in 3 months. Wednesday, May 5th, 10:30 to 12. So I'll be populating that out into everyone's schedule. And hopefully we'll have time everyone will have time to meet then. Our plan right now is, I think McEwen's going to have a presentation on their ISO implementation. I may schedule something in between, and it'll depend, a bit of a lunch and learn on sustainability on campus. So it might be applicable to folks who are kind of starting up their sustainability approaches to give some ideas about priorities and the opportunities, the ways you can do things. So you can watch for that. Let me know if you're interested in that, or if there's some specific topic, because we could always arrange and schedule alternatives. We can find folks. What I'm hoping to, it looks like UC, and thanks Michael at UVA for giving me a contact, is to schedule some of the benchmarking folks from cities, so municipalities of Calgary and Edmonton, come talk about those, how they use Energy Star and how they benchmark. That might inform what we can do as well. But yeah, I think if, go ahead, Jason, if you'd like to say. Comment.
If you were bringing in the municipalities from the bigger centers, would you guys be adverse if we were to expand this to the city of Red Deer a little bit? Because I've attempted to reach out to their engineering team to do something like this, and they're interested, but I think it would be helpful to get some context of how a partnership might work between a city and a post-secondary. So yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, that would be excellent. I think that would be a great opportunity. Certainly, anybody who's interested in the call and who's running buildings could, but that in particular, if we set that up, certainly I'm adding the RDC and finding contacts there and giving them a chance to talk directly to the cities in that context would be great. No, I appreciate that idea. Yeah, so then maybe what we'll do is we'll see if I'll reach back to that engineering lead from the city of Red Deer, and for that specific meeting, if the group doesn't mind, I would love to extend that opportunity, because it would just help us give some context to them, because I'm trying to describe what this might look like, and they do have a bit of a plan, and we've been fortunate to hire some really talented staff within our team to help us with this, but just that partnership on their side, just to keep that momentum moving. So thanks for that. Oh no, excellent, thanks. Yeah, that's great. Well, if there's nothing else, I think we're ended. I'll stay on the call a little bit longer, see if there's anybody who wants to talk. Certainly, I'm available for that. But again, thanks everybody for your participation. Thanks for coming with questions and being patient with some of our technical issues. Appreciate that. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. See ya.
Thanks. Yeah, bye.
Everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Jim, thanks very much. Appreciate being able to answer some of the questions and to help out in the last minute there. Really appreciate it. Getting all that data together. I know it's a struggle, so that was great.